We turn now to North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. Based on our CBS News reporting, he is under serious consideration by the former president to become his running mate in this campaign. Good morning to you, Governor.
Good morning, Margaret. Good to be with you.
It's good to have you back on Face the Nation. You just heard our polling there. 57% of Americans think the jury reached the right verdict. 56% think Trump got a fair trial. A majority of Americans are unconvinced by this claim that it's all a sham. Why do you think it is?
Well, I think part of it, of course, polling is a point in time, and I had a chance to briefly look at some of your poll numbers this morning, and I also saw in there that almost 2/3 of the respondents said they weren't paying close attention. And I understand that they're not paying close attention to the trial because most Americans out there, they've got working Americans don't have time to watch TV all day, read every report because they're facing all the things, putting food on the table, gas in the car,
right,
all the challenges that they're facing. And I think that as this moment in time passes, when we have the election coming this fall, people are going to make a decision about are they better off today than they were 4 years ago? And this is an unusual thing that President Trump's not a candidate that's unknown or never run before. They had an opportunity to live their life under 4 years of him, and they had a chance to, prosper, and they had a chance to understand what the world was like, no wars. And now that it's a very different situation. So I think, it's interesting and it's captivating right now to a lot of people. The election is not going to turn on this trial.
The U.S. isn't involved in a war right now either. But
we're involved in 2 proxy wars.
We were then as well. But on your point, Donald Trump spends a lot of time talking about these trials. It's not just journalists, and it's historic, but he talks quite a lot about it. And in fact, he held an extensive news conference Friday with a litany of grievances against the judge, who will still have to decide on his sentencing. Personal judgment-wise, do you think that was a smart thing to do?
Well, I have a lot of empathy for what he must feel like, and because as a business person, I spent 30 years in tech, but a lot of that was in software that dealt with business processes. I mean, I've never seen anything like this where you can, magically take a transaction that gets spread out over 11 paychecks, 12 vouchers, 11 invoices, and suddenly each of those around one decision, they magically become, instead of misdemeanors, they become a felony. And if they're
because of the election fraud, as you just heard.
I don't know that anybody in America, if we're asking about the voter, I don't know anybody in America can explain how a business transaction filing errors from 7 years ago become federal election law when federal election law is not a state. This is brought in the county court. Federal election is federal. And I don't know, the alchemy of transforming these misdemeanors, which had a 2-year statute of limitations. So I'm saying from a business perspective, CEOs around America, if you've had hundreds of millions of business filings in America in the last 7 years, why aren't our courts clogged with other CEOs that were dragged in front of the court?
If they were running for president and changing those business records to obscure donations to their own campaign, you know what I'm saying. This isn't just filing error.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but most Americans cannot explain it. Many of the legal experts, of the legal experts that stood on the curb outside the courthouse for 6 weeks can't explain it. So Americans are going to come back to the issues that affect them because this trial outcome doesn't affect them. The inflation affects them.
It does. And I want to talk about some of those issues more in depth with you in a few minutes. We just put up a graph to show you our polling. It's 2/3 of those polled said they are watching closely. But in terms of like the bookkeeping argument, this was about a criminal conspiracy to influence an election and creating paperwork to cover it up. If the quibble is about paperwork violations, the President of the United States, his son, says under the influence of drugs, he committed a paperwork error. That's now going to federal court because of what he did in purchasing that gun. That was a paperwork violation. Are you also offended by that? Is that also a miscarriage of justice?
Well, I think what's sad for America is the whole weaponization of the system, and what we're going to see more of this. I mean, earlier in my life,
you think it's weaponized against Hunter Biden?
I think that is weaponized against President Trump. But if you're going to talk about equivalency in the courts, then we know that media companies have acknowledged that they worked in conjunction with the federal government to suppress information about Hunter Biden's laptop during an election year.
That is not true whatsoever. when it comes to this journalist or the journalists involved with this program?
Well, then why were his stories about it taken down off of media companies? Why was it being suppressed during that election? Why talk about the Steele dossier? I mean, we could go back. There is all kinds of things going on in our country related to election integrity, and I think whether you're an independent, you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, we should all care about election integrity. And if we want to have equivalency, then to make sure that we have a level playing field.
We have